everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm Matt Garrahan. I'm very pleased to say that Matthew Freud is joining us here. We're going to talk about whether people can see the truth. And as one of the most renowned practitioners of communications, you know all about that, right? And what I'd like to know first of all is, why don't we start at the beginning, and why don't you tell us how you got into this business? 1985, at the age of 21, and you start a communications firm and take it from there.
I come from a family of some repute, and it's sort of a famous family, but without any big fortune, regrettably. So I had to work for a living, and there's a kind of unofficial rule in my family that you can't do what anyone else has done before. So that ruled out psychoanalysis and art and politics, and journalism and broadcasting, and the sale of quality door furniture. And I sort of stumbled into a job in PR at the age of about 19, and I quite liked it. And I then latterly discovered a great uncle that I wasn't aware of, who was a guy called Edward Bernays, who was the father of propaganda and first coined the term public relations. And so in breaking with the family veto tradition, I started the company. I was 21. That's 30 some years ago. And you know, the interesting thing about what the industry has become is that it trades essentially on reputation, and reputation, to my mind, is perhaps the most valuable commodity on earth. I mean, when I started, I think reputation was an incredibly readily available commodity. You know, we trusted politicians, we admired actors, we thought businesses were on our side, we thought banks were great. And gradually, over the last 25 to 30 years, the public trust in virtually every institution on earth has been eroded or eviscerated. And you're seeing that on a daily and weekly basis now.
But is that because of attempts to obfuscate, and talking about people seeing the truth and the relationship between propaganda and communications? Are they natural bedfellows, those two things?
I mean, look, I think in the end we all get exactly the reputation we deserve.
Right.
I'd caveat that by saying very often not for what we deserve it for. I think a lot of people who lose their reputation lose it under tough circumstances, but probably deserve to lose it. And a lot of people who are celebrated quite often are celebrated for things they haven't done, but deserve to be celebrated anyway. But a reputation once lost is incredibly difficult to restore. And should we think better of politicians? Should we think better of banks? Should we think better of companies? I'm not sure. I think what this house cleaning over the last decade has uncovered is that there were a lot of people who were acting with enormous vested interest, who were purporting to act in the public interest. And I don't hold with the media's view that every politician is corrupt, that every celebrity is self-serving, and that every business cares only about shareholder value. But certainly shining a light on those institutions has been a valuable process.
But it seems to be, in terms of the undermining of reputations, or the blowing up of reputations, that social media and technology are amplifying that or accelerating that process, particularly now with the Weinstein scandal, with the parliamentary scandal in the UK, other sort of harassment scandals.
If the media were the institution that were there to hold other institutions to account, then they were also trading on their own account, and the underlying trust in media has also massively eroded. And part of that is that the media got too upset about too many things, and if we all believed everything that we read in the newspapers, then it's hard to imagine the underlying culture of the world. But I think we process and filter through our own experience and our own worldview. And the human experience is not that everyone is a terrible person, that everyone deserves to be crucified at the hands of the tabloid newspapers or tabloid TV. And what social media has allowed is a true debate and a true dialogue about every story that comes into the public view. And I, you know, the subject on the card was, can people hear the truth? I genuinely think they can. I think we process these billion points of information that are available to all of us through our own values and our own worldview, and we're pretty good at sniffing out the rats and are not, you know, sort of following the media herd, where we're told in politics that everything is black or white. The world is incredibly nuanced. And so, you know, to the most recent scandal with Weinstein and the gropers, you know, I think it's fantastic that part of the output of this media frenzy around famous people being held to account for their behavior is that the overlying view in society of gender roles and the way women are treated will fundamentally change. And you know, history will record that it will change because of Harvey Weinstein. Well, it's needed to change for 200 years. I mean, this is a movement and a revolution that's been a very, very long time coming. But it takes a single lightning rod to attract all of that energy and then to achieve the change that will come about.
So you mentioned the word movement. I mean,
yes.
that's clearly what's happening now with the you know, this explosion, these claims, people coming forward, people feeling emboldened. Do you, in your business,
yeah,
you do a lot of work with you know, cause marketing,
yeah,
organizations that...
I think the fun of what we do now is we used to talk about campaigns, which was right, individuals or institutions or companies talking to people and trying to get a message across. That's a campaign. A movement is about triggering a response in the public and in consumers and in opinion formers to change the way that they think and to change the way that they act. And social media is the most powerful tool for instant creations of movements that there's ever been. I mean, the civil rights movement was a masterpiece of very analog organization. I mean, if you read books on the civil rights movement in America, it was about working out how to photocopy, or not photocopy, photostat
yeah,
leaflets. It was about carpools where people could be picked up from work and taken to activists' offices in order to then be driven somewhere else to organize a rally. A movement now can be started from your phone in less than an hour and can reach infinitely more people than any other communications means in history. So it's, you know, we have the tools to change so much. I think there's a responsibility about how we collectively use that, because in an era which has seen as much fake news as it has real news, you have to be careful that the movements that are starting aren't either driven by people who have vested interests in the outcome of that movement. So if you look at you know, what is currently standing in the way of the, you know, one of the greatest movements of our generation, which is around climate change, sustainability, and the environment. There is a movement that counters that is very well funded and very well resourced by people who are vested in the...
Right. So do movements, they don't always have to be organic then, do they? They can be formed, companies can start them, people can come together and start them.
So it's very easy to start a movement. A true movement will be born of populist support.
Right.
But as we saw with Brexit, as we saw with Trump, those movements don't always come from the left. They don't always come from a liberal agenda. The right and those who are interested in maintaining the status quo have become extremely adept at using exactly the same techniques as the progressive front have been using successfully for the last 20 years.
Now, I know we're on a bit of a clock here, so you mentioned reputation
yes,
when we started, the world's most valuable commodity. I mean, we're at Web Summit, a lot of startups here, reputation as important in startup companies and big tech companies, and I'm thinking particularly of Uber and the scandal that it went through. How does that translate? What kind of lessons are there for entrepreneurs?
When we were here last year, Uber was just beginning to get into trouble. And what was apparent, I think, to everyone who was an Uber customer and to people who were watching and observing Uber, was that they had no real values as a company beyond market domination. And to be fair to Travis and the leadership of Uber at the time, that was a very tough global industry to disrupt. Traditionally, taxi businesses had a very strong lock on their own civic territory. And so, it was a turf war that he was fighting. And he was probably one of the only people who was tough enough to go in and win that battle. But he didn't win it by caring about the outcome or the collateral damage beyond winning for his company and his brand. And it was clear in the way that they behaved towards their competitors and the way they behaved towards the incumbent industry that he wasn't taking any prisoners. And that included his own drivers,
right,
who it was quite clear he was impatient to replace with autonomous drivers. And so we had small clues, his explosion in the back of a car, minor issues about the way he treated his staff and the culture of the company really became representative of the fact that Uber didn't have an underlying set of responsibilities that coupled with their ambition. And I'm sure in his mind, post-IPO, post becoming an incredibly wealthy man, he would have done what very many other people have done in his position and created a foundation, like the Carnegie model, where you make your money in one place and then after you've made it, you then give it back into something else.
So get his reputation back after the fact.
Yeah, so you lose it to make your fortune and then you restore it once you made it.
That doesn't work anymore, does it?
Look, Bill Gates is one of the greatest human beings on earth, and the impact he's had with his foundation is absolutely equal to the impact that he had with Microsoft. But I think the opportunity for startups is to bake the goodness in. Is if you can project your values, if you can articulate and define your values as a startup, then your customers and your stakeholders will inherently feel that what you're trying to do has value beyond just the value that you're creating in shareholders.
And it all comes back to propaganda ultimately, or not?
We have a very, very simple line at Freud's. People come to us and they say, we would like a better reputation. That's fundamentally why people come to a PR company. And we have a really simple response, which is great, be better. Because pretending to be better doesn't work. Partly because of the scrutiny through social media, that every interaction that your business or that your agenda is subject to will expose the lie very, very quickly. So the best way to have people think better of you is be better.
And you've talked about companies with a purpose.
Yeah.
And companies that do sometimes sell things that might not be particularly wholesome, but getting a purpose and get.
I don't think anyone is allowed to be oblivious to the consequences of their actions, and that applies to the food chain, the supply chain, of where you get your materials, to how you treat your employees, to how you treat women, to how you treat your customers. And people will divine who you are and what you believe in through your actions, and it's just no longer acceptable to say I didn't know, right, or I come from a different generation, or I thought it was going to be okay. It's just not all right anymore.
Yeah. Very fascinating stuff, very sage advice for those here, and there's a red flashing light, so we'll call it there. But Matthew, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.